The January wind howled like a wounded animal through the mountain pass, and Wade Harlow knew that anyone caught outside tonight would be dead by morning. He pushed through the knee-deep snow toward his cabin, arms loaded with firewood, when he heard a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the storm's fury. A whimper, human, female. Wade dropped the wood and ran toward the sound, his massive frame cutting through the drifts with practiced ease. 20 yards from his property line, he found her, a young woman huddled against a pine tree, her lips blue, her entire body shaking so violently she could barely stand. Ice crystals clung to her dark hair, and her thin traveling dress was wholly inadequate for a Colorado winter storm. She looked up at him with eyes that were losing focus, and Wade knew she had minutes, not hours. "Can you walk?" he asked, already knowing the answer. She tried to respond, but her jaw was locked from the cold. Wade did not hesitate. He swept her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing and carried her toward his cabin. Her head lolled against his chest, and he quickened his pace, his heart hammering with an urgency that had nothing to do with the exertion. When they reached the cabin, Wade kicked the door open and immediately assessed the situation. The fire in the hearth was burning low, but it was warm inside. He set her down in the chair closest to the fireplace and began stoking the flames, building them higher. The woman's shaking had not stopped, and her breathing was shallow. "I need to get you out of these wet clothes," Wade said, keeping his voice calm and professional. "You will die if we do not warm you up." She managed a small nod, though Wade was not sure she truly understood. He grabbed every blanket he owned from his bed and the trunk, then turned his back to give her privacy. "Can you manage?" A long silence followed, then a barely audible "no." Wade closed his eyes briefly, steeling himself. He had lived alone in these mountains for 5 years, avoiding civilization and especially avoiding women. But this was life or death. He turned around and helped her with shaking hands remove the wet dress, keeping his eyes averted as much as possible while wrapping her in the dry blankets. Her skin was like ice beneath his calloused fingers. Once she was wrapped completely, Wade lifted her again and settled her into his own chair, the one closest to the fire. He piled the blankets higher, tucking them around her feet and shoulders. Then he set a pot of water on the stove to heat for tea. "What is your name?" he asked gently. Her teeth chattered so hard it took 3 tries before she could speak. Katherine Pierce. I am Wade Harlow. You are safe now, Katherine." He poured the warming water into a cup and added tea leaves, then held it to her lips. "Drink slowly." She took a small sip, then another. Some color was beginning to return to her face, though she still trembled. Wade knelt beside the chair, watching her carefully for signs of frostbite, or worse. Her fingers looked bad, white and waxy, but he thought they would recover with proper care. "What were you doing out in this storm?" he asked. Katherine's eyes filled with tears, though they did not fall. "The stagecoach. It broke a wheel 5 miles back. The driver said we had to wait for help, but the storm got worse. I thought I saw smoke from a chimney and tried to walk toward it. I got turned around." Wade felt anger rise in his chest. "The driver let you walk off alone?" "He tried to stop me. I was foolish." Her voice was stronger now, though still weak. "The other passengers were an elderly couple. They could not travel through the snow. I thought I could make it." "You nearly died." "I know." She looked at him directly for the first time, and Wade felt something shift in his chest. Her eyes were a remarkable shade of green, like new spring leaves. "Thank you for saving my life." Wade nodded gruffly and stood, uncomfortable with gratitude. He was not accustomed to company, and having a woman in his cabin, especially one as pretty as Katherine Pierce, even half-frozen, unsettled him in ways he could not name. "You will stay here tonight. The storm will not break until morning at earliest." "I cannot take your bed," Katherine protested. "You can, and you will." Wade was already pulling on his heavy coat. "I will sleep in the barn." "No, please, I could not. The barn is weatherproof, and I have slept there before." It was not entirely true, but Wade was not about to argue. His cabin was a single room, and propriety demanded he give her privacy. "Keep the fire going. There is food in the cupboard if you get hungry. Do not go outside for any reason." Before Katherine could protest further, Wade grabbed an extra blanket and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit him like a fist, but he welcomed it. His mind was churning with thoughts he had no business thinking about a woman he had just met, a woman who would be gone as soon as the storm cleared. The barn was dark and cold, but Wade found the oil lamp and lit it. His 2 horses, a mare named Betsy and a gelding called Thunder, nickered at him from their stalls. He checked their water and hay, then climbed into the loft where he stored extra feed. There was a pile of old horse blankets there, and Wade wrapped himself in them, trying to get comfortable in the hay. Sleep did not come easily. The wind screamed through the cracks in the barn walls, and Wade found his thoughts returning again and again to the woman in his cabin. Katherine. She had been heading somewhere when the stagecoach broke down. She would leave as soon as she could, and Wade would return to his solitary life. That was how it had to be. He had come to these mountains to escape his past, to forget the war and the things he had done. He had built this cabin with his own hands, clearing the land and cutting every log. It was a hard life, but it was honest, and it was his. Women like Katherine Pierce did not belong in places like this. She was refined, educated, he could tell from the way she spoke. She probably came from a good family back east, with suitors lining up at her door. Wade pulled the blankets tighter and tried to stop thinking about green eyes. Morning came slowly, the storm finally exhausting itself near dawn. Wade woke stiff and cold, his breath misting in the air. He checked on the horses, then made his way back to the cabin, unsure what he would find. Katherine was awake, sitting in the same chair, still wrapped in blankets. But the color had returned to her face, and her eyes were bright and alert. The fire was burning well, and the cabin was warm. She had clearly been up for some time. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft. "I hope you were not too uncomfortable." Wade grunted and began to remove his coat. "I have survived worse. How are you feeling?" "Much better, thanks to you." She gestured to her hands. "My fingers hurt terribly, but I think that means they are healing." "Let me see." Wade crossed to her and took her hands in his, examining them carefully. The skin was red and tender, but there was no blackening. "You were lucky. Keep them warm for a few more days, and they should recover fully." He became aware suddenly of how close they were, of her hands resting in his much larger ones. Katherine was looking up at him with an expression he could not read, and Wade released her quickly, stepping back. "Are you hungry?" he asked, moving toward the stove. "Starving, actually. But you do not need to. I am making breakfast anyway." Wade began pulling out supplies: bacon, eggs from his chickens, bread he had baked 2 days prior. Cooking gave him something to do with his hands, a reason not to look at Katherine. They ate in silence, or near silence. Katherine asked polite questions about the cabin, about how long Wade had lived here, and he gave short answers. 5 years. He trapped and hunted. Once a month he went down to Park City, Utah, to sell furs and buy supplies. It was a simple life. "Do you ever get lonely?" Katherine asked suddenly. The question caught Wade off guard. "No," he said automatically, then reconsidered. "Sometimes. But loneliness is better than the alternative." "What alternative is that?" Wade did not answer. He stood and began clearing the dishes, his jaw set. "I'm sorry," Katherine said quickly. "I did not mean to pry. You should rest more. I will check the road, see if it is passable." He escaped outside before she could respond. The morning was clear and brutally cold, the sky a hard blue that promised no more snow for now. Wade trudged toward where he had found Katherine the night before, following her tracks backward until he found the main road. It was covered in deep drifts, completely impassable for a stagecoach or even a horse. It would take at least a day, maybe 2, for the road to become usable again, which meant Katherine would be staying longer. Wade tried to ignore the small spark of satisfaction that thought brought him. When he returned to the cabin, Katherine had washed the dishes and was attempting to tidy up, though she was still wrapped in a blanket like a cape. Wade's spare clothes were far too large for her, but she had found one of his shirts and was wearing it over her undergarments, the hem falling nearly to her knees. "The road is blocked," Wade said. "It will be a day or 2 before anyone can get through." Katherine's face fell slightly. "I see. I hope my presence is not too much of an inconvenience." "It is not." The words came out more forcefully than Wade intended. He softened his tone. "You are welcome to stay as long as needed. I will continue to sleep in the barn." "That is not fair to you. This is your home." "It is not up for discussion." Wade began pulling on his coat again. "I have work to do. I need to check my trap lines. Will you be all right alone?" Katherine nodded. "Of course. I'm not helpless." Wade believed her. Despite her refined appearance, there was steel in Katherine Pierce. She had survived a night that would have killed most people. He respected that. He spent the day checking his traps, finding several rabbits and one fox. The cold work helped clear his mind, though he found himself hurrying more than usual, eager to return to the cabin. When he finally made it back, the sun was setting and smoke was curling from the chimney. Wade opened the door to find the cabin transformed. Katherine had cleaned everything, swept the floor, and somehow managed to cook a stew that filled the air with the most incredible smell. His bed was neatly made, his few possessions organized. The place looked more like a home than it had in 5 years. Katherine turned from the stove, a shy smile on her face. "I hope you do not mind. I needed something to do." Wade just stood there, overwhelmed by the domesticity of it all. This was what he had walked away from after the war, the life he had convinced himself he did not deserve. Seeing it now, having Katherine here, it awakened something in him he thought he had buried forever. "It looks good," he managed. "Thank you." They ate together, and this time the conversation flowed more easily. Katherine told him about her life in Boston, about her father who was a banker, and her mother who had died 3 years prior. She had been traveling to California to live with her aunt, seeking a new start after her father had remarried a woman Katherine could not abide. "She was not cruel," Katherine explained, "but she made it clear I was no longer welcome in the house. I was 22 years old and unmarried, which she found scandalous. She kept introducing me to her son from her first marriage, pushing us together constantly." "You did not like him?" "He was 45 years old and had already buried 2 wives. Katherine's voice was sharp with remembered distaste. "I refused his proposal 3 times before my father finally agreed to let me go to my aunt. He gave me enough money for passage and a little extra, but made it clear I was on my own now." Wade felt anger on her behalf, though he kept it from his voice. "That must have been difficult." "It was liberating, actually. For the first time in my life, I was making my own choices." She looked at him with those green eyes. "Though I admit my choice to walk into that storm was not my finest moment of independence," Wade found himself almost smiling. "We all make mistakes." "What mistake brought you to these mountains?" The question hung in the air between them. Wade considered deflecting again, but something about Katherine made him want to trust her. Maybe it was the way she had shared her own story, or maybe it was simply that he had been alone for too long. "I was a soldier," he said finally, "in the war. I did things I am not proud of. After it ended, I could not go back to who I was before, so I came here." "What things?" Katherine asked gently. Wade shook his head. "Things I do not talk about," she nodded, accepting his boundary. "My father fought too. He came back different, quieter. He would wake screaming sometimes for years afterward." "It changes you," Wade said. "War. You see what people are capable of, what you are capable of. It is hard to forget." "Is that why you live alone?" "I live alone because I choose to, because it is simpler." "And is it?" Katherine asked. "Simpler?" Wade did not have an answer for that, at least not when he was willing to voice. He stood and began clearing the dishes again, retreating into familiar actions. That night, as he lay in the barn loft, Wade found sleep even more elusive than before. Katherine's question echoed in his mind. Was his life simpler? Or had he just been hiding? The next day followed a similar pattern. Wade worked while Katherine kept the cabin, and they ate meals together and talked. With each conversation, Wade felt the walls he had built around himself beginning to crack. Katherine was intelligent and funny, with a sharp wit that caught him off guard. She asked him about his life in the mountains, about the animals and the seasons, and she listened to his answers with genuine interest. He found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, about the bear that had tried to break into his cabin the first winter, about the day he had gotten lost in a whiteout and nearly died, about the strange peace he found in the absolute silence of a snowfall. In turn, Katherine told him about Boston society, about the ridiculous rules and expectations placed on women, about the books she loved and the dreams she had of seeing the ocean in California. She wanted to teach, she said. Her aunt ran a small school and had promised Katherine a position. "Do you like children?" Wade asked. "Very much. I used to volunteer at an orphanage in Boston. The children there had so little, but they were so hungry to learn." Her face lit up when she spoke about it. "I taught a girl named Mary to read. She was 10 years old and could not even write her own name, but she was so clever. Within 3 months, she was reading full books." Wade watched her as she spoke, taking in the animation of her features, the passion in her voice. Katherine Pierce was remarkable, and he was falling for her. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He could not fall for her. She was leaving as soon as the road cleared. She had a whole life waiting for her in California, and Wade was a mountain man with a dark past and no future to offer anyone. On the third day, Wade rode down to check the main road. The sun had been strong, and a warm wind from the south had cleared much of the snow. The road was passable now, at least for a rider. He stopped at the way station 5 miles south and learned that the stagecoach had indeed broken down. The elderly couple Katherine had mentioned had been rescued and taken back to Park City. A new coach would be coming through in 2 days to pick up any stranded passengers. Wade should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. When he returned to the cabin and told Katherine the news, her face went through a series of emotions he could not quite read. 2 days, she said softly. "I see. You could stay here until then," Wade offered, "or I could take you into Park City tomorrow. There's a boarding house there." "Would you prefer that?" Katherine asked, her eyes searching his face. Wade wanted to say yes. He wanted to put distance between them, to protect himself from the pain he knew was coming. But he could not lie to her. "No," he said quietly. "I would not prefer that." Something shifted in Katherine's expression. She took a step toward him. "Wade, You should not say anything," Wade interrupted, his voice rougher than he intended. "You are leaving. You have a life waiting for you." "What if I do not want that life?" "Katherine, what if I want this?" She gestured around the cabin at the simple life he had built. "What if I want you?" Wade felt his heart hammer in his chest. "You do not know what you are saying. You have been here 3 days. This life is hard. The winters are brutal. The nearest town is an hour away on a good day. You would be isolated, lonely." "I am lonely in Boston," Katherine said fiercely. "I am lonely in a city of thousands because no one truly sees me. But you see me, Wade. In 3 days, you have seen me more clearly than anyone in my entire life." "You do not know me," Wade protested, but his voice was weak. "Then tell me. Tell me why you think you do not deserve happiness." The words broke something open in Wade. He turned away from her, gripping the edge of the table. "I killed a man after the war ended," he said, the words tearing out of him. "He was a Confederate soldier. The war was over, but we did not know it yet. He was just a kid, maybe 17. He came around a corner and I shot him without thinking. I killed a child for no reason." Silence filled the cabin. Wade waited for Katherine's horror, her disgust. Instead, he felt her hand on his back, gentle and warm. "That is what war does," she said softly. "It turns good men into killers. But that does not mean you are not still a good man, Wade. You do not understand. I understand that you have punished yourself for 5 years. I understand that you saved my life without a second thought, that you gave me your home and slept in a freezing barn to protect my honor, that you have shown me more kindness than anyone I have ever known." Her voice was fierce now. "I understand that you are the best man I have ever met, and I am falling in love with you." Wade turned to face her, and the look in her eyes took his breath away. "Katherine, I have nothing to offer you. This cabin, this life, it is not enough." "It is everything," she whispered. And then she was in his arms, and Wade was kissing her with 5 years of loneliness, and longing poured into it. Katherine kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. She felt perfect against him, like she was made to fit exactly there. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Once you decide this, there's no going back. California is too far. Your aunt can be contacted by letter. Wade, I am choosing this. I'm choosing you." She pulled back to look at him directly. Unless you do not want me to stay? I want you to stay more than I have ever wanted anything, Wade said, the truth of it resonating through his entire body. I want you to stay forever. Katherine's smile was radiant. Then I will. They spent the rest of that day and night talking, making plans, learning each other. Wade told Katherine everything about his past, holding nothing back. She listened without judgment, and when he finished, she kissed him and told him she loved him anyway. Katherine told him about her fears of being trapped in Boston, of becoming like the other society women she knew who were miserable in their gilded cages. She told him about her dreams of freedom, of living a life that mattered. I thought California was my only option, she said, but this being here with you, this is what I've been searching for. When Wade finally retreated to the barn that night, it was with the knowledge that he would not have to sleep there much longer. They would marry as soon as they could get to Park City. It was fast, perhaps scandalously so, but Wade had learned during the war that life was short and uncertain. When you found something worth holding on to, you did not let go. The next morning, Wade woke to find several inches of fresh snow had fallen overnight, but this snow was lighter, gentler. He went to the cabin and found Katherine already awake, making coffee. She turned when he entered, her face glowing with happiness. "Good morning," she said, and the simple domesticity of the moment made Wade's chest ache with joy. "Good morning." He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms, kissing her slowly. "How would you feel about riding into Park City today?" "To find a preacher?" Katherine guessed. "And to send a telegram to your aunt explaining the situation, and to get you a proper dress to be married in if you want one." Katherine laughed. "Wade Harlow, are you trying to be romantic?" "I am trying to do this right," he said seriously. "You deserve that." Her eyes softened. "I do not need a fancy dress. I just need you." They rode into Park City that afternoon, Katherine seated in front of Wade on Thunder, wrapped in his arms in several blankets. The town was small but bustling, and Wade felt the familiar discomfort of being around so many people. But Katherine's presence beside him made it bearable. They found the preacher first, a kind-faced man named Reverend Collins, who agreed to marry them the following morning. Then they went to the general store, where Katherine picked out a simple blue dress that matched her eyes. Wade insisted on buying her a warm coat as well, and new boots lined with rabbit fur. At the telegraph office, Katherine composed a message to her aunt explaining that she had met someone and would be staying in Utah. She hesitated before sending it, and Wade squeezed her hand. "If you have doubts," he began. "I do not have doubts," Katherine said firmly. "I'm just sad I will not get to know my aunt better. But I can invite her to visit, cannot I?" "Of course. Anyone you want to come is welcome." They spent the night in separate rooms at the boarding house, honoring propriety for one more night. Wade barely slept, nervous in a way he had not been since before the war. What if Katherine changed her mind? What if she woke up and realized she was making a terrible mistake? But when morning came and he met her outside the church, all his fears vanished. Katherine was wearing the blue dress, her dark hair pinned up with wildflowers someone had given her. She looked beautiful, but more than that, she looked happy. She looked certain. The ceremony was simple, attended only by Reverend Collins, his wife, and a few curious townspeople. When Wade slipped the simple gold band onto Katherine's finger, purchased that morning from the general store, his hand was shaking, but his voice was steady when he said his vows, promising to love and protect her for the rest of his life. Katherine's voice was equally steady, her green eyes never leaving his face as she promised to love and honor him always. When Reverend Collins pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed Katherine with all the love and hope he had thought he would never feel again. The small crowd applauded, and Mrs. Collins cried happy tears. They stayed in town that night, in a nicer room at the boarding house, and Wade made love to his wife with tenderness and passion. Katherine was inexperienced, but eager, and Wade took his time, wanting to make it perfect for her. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Wade felt a completeness he had never known. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I love you too," Katherine whispered back. "Thank you for finding me in the snow." "Thank you for walking into that storm," Wade said, and they both laughed softly. The next morning, they rode back to the cabin, their cabin now. Wade had worried that Katherine might have regrets in the harsh light of day, but she seemed more excited than ever. She chattered about all the things she wanted to do: plant a garden in the spring, get chickens, maybe a milk cow if Wade thought they could manage it. "I want to make curtains for the windows," she said, "and we should add a shelf for books. I will order some from back east. Do you like to read?" "I have not read much since the war," Wade admitted, "but I used to enjoy it." "Then I will read to you," Katherine declared, "every night by the fire." And she did. That became their routine over the long winter months. Wade would work during the day, checking trap lines and hunting, while Katherine kept the cabin and prepared meals. But in the evenings they would sit together by the fire, and Katherine would read aloud from books that arrived periodically from Park City. They read adventure stories and poetry, histories and novels. Wade found himself looking forward to it, to the sound of Katherine's voice and the warmth of her pressed against his side. But it was not all easy. The winter was hard, with several more storms that trapped them inside for days at a time. The cabin, which had seemed spacious to Wade alone, felt cramped with 2 people. They had their first real argument in February, when Wade wanted to check his trap lines, despite dangerous conditions, and Katherine insisted it was too risky. "I have been doing this for 5 years, Wade said, frustration creeping into his voice. "I know what I am doing." "And if you get hurt or lost, what am I supposed to do?" Katherine shot back. "I do not know these mountains like you do. I could not find you. I could not help you." "I will be fine." "You do not know that. Wade, please. The furs can wait another day." They stared at each other, both stubborn, both afraid. Finally, Wade let out a long breath. "You are right," he said. "I'm sorry. It can wait." Katherine's shoulders sagged with relief. "I'm sorry for yelling. I cannot lose you. Not when I just found you." Wade pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "You will not lose me. I promise." After that, they developed a system. When Wade went out, he would tell Katherine exactly where he was going and when he expected to return. If he was not back within an hour of that time, Katherine knew to fire 3 shots from the rifle Wade had taught her to shoot, and Wade would respond so she could find him. They only had to use the system once, when Wade fell through thin ice into a creek and had to take shelter in a cave to avoid hypothermia. Katherine's shots led him home, where she had the fire blazing and hot water ready. She did not scold him, just helped him out of his frozen clothes and warmed him with her own body, silent tears streaming down her face. "I'm all right," Wade murmured, holding her. "I'm all right." "I thought I had lost you," Katherine whispered. "Never," Wade promised. "I will always come back to you." Spring finally came in late March, the snow melting and the world coming back to life. Katherine was overjoyed, spending hours outside planning her garden. Wade helped her clear a plot and build a fence to keep out deer and rabbits. They planted vegetables and herbs, and Katherine carefully tended them every day. The isolation that Wade had once craved now felt less necessary. With Katherine beside him, he found he did not mind the occasional trip to Park City for supplies and socializing. Katherine made friends with several of the townswomen, including Mrs. Collins, and they would visit once a month or so. In May, Katherine realized she was pregnant. She told Wade one evening after dinner, her hands shaking slightly as she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said softly. Wade felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. A baby. His baby. He had never imagined he would be a father, had never thought he deserved that kind of happiness, but looking at Katherine's hopeful, anxious face, he felt joy flood through him. "A baby," he repeated, then broke into a wide grin. "Katherine, that is, we are going to have a baby." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands. "Are you happy?" he asked. "So happy," Katherine said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Are you?" "I've never been happier in my entire life," Wade said honestly. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Katherine's garden flourished, providing them with fresh vegetables. Wade added on to the cabin, building a small separate room that would serve as a nursery. He made a cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Katherine sewed baby clothes and blankets, humming as she worked. She glowed with health and happiness, and Wade fell more in love with her every single day. He would often pause in his work just to watch her, marveling that she was his wife, that she had chosen this life with him. In September, Katherine went into labor. Wade rode to Park City to fetch Mrs. Collins, who had agreed to serve as midwife. The hours that followed were the longest of Wade's life. He paced outside the cabin, listening to Katherine's cries, feeling helpless and terrified. Mrs. Collins had banished him from the room, saying he would only be in the way. Finally, just as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound, a baby's cry. Wade's knees nearly buckled with relief. A moment later, Mrs. Collins opened the door, beaming. "You have a son," she said, "a big, healthy boy, and your wife did wonderfully." Wade rushed inside to find Katherine propped up in bed, exhausted but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. Wade approached slowly, reverently, and Katherine pulled the blanket back so he could see. His son had a full head of dark hair and was wailing with impressive lung power. As Wade reached out a tentative finger, the baby's hand closed around it with surprising strength. Wade felt something break open in his chest, a love so fierce and overwhelming he could barely breathe. "He is perfect," Wade whispered. "He has your chin," Katherine said softly, "and I think he will have your build too, if the way he eats is any indication." Wade looked at his wife, at the love shining in her eyes, and felt tears prick his own. "Thank you," he said hoarsely, "for all of this, for choosing me, for giving me a family." "Thank you for finding me in the snow," Katherine said, echoing her words from their wedding night, "for giving me a home." They named the boy William, after Wade's father who had died when Wade was young. William Harlow grew fast and strong, with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. He was a happy baby, content to watch his parents work during the day and sleep peacefully at night. That first winter with William was challenging. The baby needed constant care, and Katherine was often exhausted. Wade took on more of the household tasks, learning to cook and clean while Katherine nursed their son. They worked as a team, supporting each other through the difficult moments and celebrating the small victories, William's first smile, his first laugh. By the time spring came again, they had settled into a comfortable rhythm. William was crawling now, getting into everything, and the cabin rang with his laughter and babbling. Wade had never imagined he could be this happy, that his life could feel this full. Katherine's aunt finally wrote back in April, sending her belated blessings on the marriage and expressing delight at becoming a great aunt. She sent gifts for William and an open invitation for them to visit California whenever they wished. Katherine cried when she read the letter, relieved that her family had not disowned her for her impulsive choice. "Maybe we could visit next year," she suggested, "when William is older and can travel better." "I would like that," Wade agreed. He had overcome his fear of traveling, his need to hide in the mountains. With Katherine and William, he felt strong enough to face the world again. The years passed in a blur of seasons and milestones. William took his first steps, spoke his first words, grew from a baby into a rambunctious toddler. When he was 2, Katherine became pregnant again, and in the spring of 1880, they welcomed a daughter. They named her Caroline, and she was as different from William as night from day, quiet and contemplative, where he was loud and energetic. Wade expanded the cabin again, adding a second bedroom and a proper kitchen. They bought the milk cow Katherine had wanted, and more chickens, and a dog named Bear who appointed himself guardian of the children. The little homestead thrived under their care. In 1882, Katherine gave birth to another son, whom they named Thomas, and in 1885 their family was completed with the arrival of a second daughter, Margaret. 4 children, each one a blessing, each one proof of the life Wade and Katherine had built together. The work was never ending. There were mouths to feed, clothes to mend, lessons to teach. Wade took William with him as soon as the boy was old enough, teaching him to trap and hunt and respect the wilderness. Katherine taught all the children to read and write, turning part of the cabin into a makeshift schoolroom. They were not wealthy. Some months money was tight and luxuries were impossible. But they had each other, and they had love, and Wade knew he was richer than any man had a right to be. One evening in the autumn of 1888, after the children were finally asleep, Wade and Katherine sat on the porch Wade had built, watching the sun set over the mountains. Katherine's head was resting on his shoulder, her hand in his. "Do you ever regret it?" Wade asked quietly. Giving up your life in Boston, the life you could have had in California? Katherine lifted her head to look at him, her green eyes still as beautiful as the day he had found her filled with love. Never, she said firmly. Not for a single moment. This life, this family, this is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it. I love you, Wade said, the words still feeling inadequate for the depth of what he felt. I love you too, Katherine said. Thank you for giving me your cabin that night. Thank you for sleeping in the barn. Thank you for seeing me when I was lost. Wade pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. Thank you for walking into that storm. Thank you for choosing to stay. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had been shining the night Wade had found Katherine nearly frozen in the snow. That night had changed everything, had given Wade a second chance at life, at happiness, at being the man he was meant to be. William appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Papa? I had a bad dream. Wade stood and scooped his oldest son into his arms. Come on, I will sit with you until you fall back asleep. Katherine smiled up at them, then followed them inside. This was their life now, interrupted sleep and endless responsibilities, scraped knees and childhood tears, laughter and chaos and love so abundant it filled every corner of their home. As Wade tucked William back into bed and Katherine checked on the other children, Wade sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. He had been lost in these mountains, hiding from his past and from himself, but Katherine had found him just as surely as he had found her. They had saved each other that winter night, and they continued to save each other every single day. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Wade's mother, whom he had not seen since before the war, passed away in 1890, and Wade made the difficult journey back east for her funeral. Katherine and the children accompanied him, and though the trip was hard, Wade found closure in saying goodbye, and in introducing his family to relatives he had thought he would never see again. When William turned 16 in 1894, he announced his intention to join the cavalry. Wade's first instinct was to forbid it, to protect his son from the horrors of military life. But Katherine gently reminded him that William needed to make his own choices, to forge his own path. He is so much like you, she said, brave and strong and determined. You have to let him go. So Wade did, though it broke his heart. He taught William everything he could about survival and discipline in the months before he left. And when the day came for William to ride away, Wade held his son tight and whispered, "Come back to us. Always come back." "I will, Papa," William promised. He kept that promise, returning home safely 2 years later with stories of adventure and a new maturity that made Wade both proud and sad. His little boy was a man now, fully grown. Carolyn married in 1897, wedding a kind young rancher named Peter who owned land 20 miles south. Katherine cried through the entire ceremony, and Wade had to excuse himself twice to compose himself. But seeing Caroline so happy, so in love, reminded Wade of his own wedding day and made the pain of letting her go bearable. Thomas proved to have his mother's mind for learning, and at Katherine's urging, Wade agreed to send him to school in Salt Lake City. It was expensive and meant months without seeing their son, but Thomas thrived there, eventually becoming a teacher himself. Wade could not have been prouder. Margaret, their youngest, was the one who loved the mountain life as much as Wade did. She learned to track and hunt, and she could outshoot her brothers by the time she was 14. She was wild and free in the way Katherine had once longed to be, and Wade knew she would find her own path in her own time. In 1900, Wade and Katherine celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children, those who lived nearby, threw them a party, and half the town of Park City turned out to celebrate. Wade stood before the crowd, holding Katherine's hand, and gave a short speech. 20 years ago, I was a man lost in the wilderness, hiding from life and from myself. Then, one winter night, I found a woman freezing in the snow, and she changed everything. Katherine gave me a home when I had only a cabin. She gave me a family when I had only loneliness. She gave me hope when I thought I had none left. I am the luckiest man alive, and I thank God for that snowstorm every single day. Katherine was crying, and so was half the crowd. She stood and kissed him in front of everyone, and Wade did not care who saw. He had learned long ago that love was nothing to hide. The new century brought changes. Park City grew larger, more modern. There was talk of electricity and automobiles. Wade watched it all with a mixture of amusement and bemusement, content with his simple life. In 1905, William married and gave Wade and Katherine their first grandchild, a boy named Jack. Holding his grandson for the first time, Wade felt the circle complete. He had been saved by love, had built a family on that foundation, and now that family was growing and flourishing beyond him. More grandchildren followed over the years. Caroline had 3 daughters. Thomas married late but had twin boys. Even Margaret eventually settled down, marrying a forest ranger and having a son she named Wade, after his grandfather. As Wade grew older, his body began to slow. His joints ached in the cold, and the heavy work of mountain life became harder. But he never complained. He had lived longer and better than he had ever expected, and he was grateful for every single day. Katherine aged too, her dark hair turning silver, lines appearing around her eyes and mouth. But to Wade, she was as beautiful at 50 as she had been at 22. More beautiful even, because every line told a story of their life together. In the spring of 1915, on the anniversary of the day they had met, Wade took Katherine back to the spot where he had found her all those years ago. The pine tree was still there, older and larger, but unmistakable. "I was so cold," Katherine said softly, touching the bark. "I thought I was going to die, and then you appeared, like something out of a dream." "I thought you were a ghost at first," Wade admitted, "too beautiful to be real." "We have built a good life, have we not?" Katherine asked, turning to him. "The best life," Wade agreed. "I would not change a single thing." They walked back to the cabin, now expanded and improved, but still fundamentally the same place Wade had built with his own hands, arm in arm. Their children and grandchildren were coming for dinner, as they did every Sunday. The cabin would be full of noise and laughter and love. As the sun set that evening, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink, Wade sat on his porch with Katherine beside him, surrounded by the family they had created. William was teaching young Jack how to whittle. Caroline's daughters were helping Katherine set the table. Thomas was engaged in a spirited debate with Margaret's husband about forestry practices. Margaret herself was bouncing her son on her knee. This was legacy, Wade thought. Not money or land or fame, but love passed down through generations. Children who knew they were wanted. Grandchildren who would grow up hearing stories about the grandfather who had found their grandmother in a snowstorm and had given her everything he had. Katherine squeezed his hand, and Wade squeezed back. No words were needed. They had lived an entire conversation in the pressure of their hands, in the warmth of their touch. That night, after everyone had gone home, Wade and Katherine lay in the bed they had shared for over 30 years. Katherine's head was on his chest, her breathing slow and even. "Katherine," Wade said softly. Thank you. For everything. For saving me." Katherine tilted her head up to look at him. "You saved me first." "We saved each other," Wade corrected. "Yes," Katherine agreed. "We did." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found each other against all odds and had built a love that would outlast them both. Years continued to pass. Wade made it to his 70th birthday in 1920, an age he had never imagined reaching. He was slower now, content to sit on his porch and watch the world go by. Katherine was by his side always, her hand in his, their love as strong as ever. In 1923, Wade fell ill with pneumonia. The doctor from Park City came and did what he could, but at 73, Wade's body was tired. He knew he was dying, and he found he was not afraid. He had lived well. He had loved and been loved. He was ready. Katherine never left his side during those final days. She held his hand and read to him, just as she had done so many nights by the fire. Their children and grandchildren came to say goodbye, filling the cabin with tears and memories. On his last day, Wade asked Katherine to help him out to the porch one more time. She did, wrapping him in blankets and settling beside him. They looked out at the mountains together, at the wilderness that had been their home for over 40 years. "I love you," Wade said, his voice weak but clear. "I have loved you from the moment I found you in that snow." I love you too, Katherine said, tears streaming down her face. I will love you forever. Promise me you will be all right, Wade said. Promise me you will keep living. I promise, Katherine whispered. Wade closed his eyes, feeling the sun on his face, Katherine's hand in his. He thought about that winter night so long ago, about the choice he had made to give a stranger his cabin and sleep in the barn. That one act of kindness had given him everything. A wife, children, grandchildren, a life filled with purpose and love. He'd been so lost back then, so convinced he did not deserve happiness. But Katherine had seen something in him worth saving, and she had loved him back to life. With his last breath, Wade smiled. He'd been found in these mountains just as surely as Katherine had been. They had found each other, and that had made all the difference. Katherine sat with him for a long time after he was gone, holding his hand, saying her goodbyes. When their children finally came to lead her inside, she looked back at Wade one more time. "Thank you for finding me in the snow," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me the best life I could have ever imagined." Wade was buried on a hill overlooking the cabin with a simple marker that read, Wade Harlow, beloved husband, father, grandfather. He gave shelter to a stranger and found love. Katherine lived another 5 years, surrounded by family, telling stories about Wade to anyone who would listen. She never remarried, never wanted to. Wade had been her great love, her only love, and she was content to wait to be with him again. When she passed peacefully in her sleep in 1928, she was buried beside Wade. Her marker read, Katherine Harlow, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She walked into a storm and found home. Their children kept the cabin, turning it into a family gathering place. Generations of Harlows would come to visit, to hear the story of their grandparents and great-grandparents, the mountain man and the lost woman who had found each other in a snowstorm and had built an empire of love. The cabin still stands today, weathered but strong, a testament to what Wade built with his own hands and what he and Katherine built together with their hearts. Inside, above the fireplace, hangs a simple wooden plaque with words that Katherine had carved shortly after their marriage. Love found here. And it was true. Love had been found in that cabin, in those mountains, in a single act of kindness on a cold winter night. Wade had given Katherine shelter when she needed it most, and she had given him something far more valuable in return, a reason to stop hiding, to start living, to believe he deserved happiness. Their love story became legend in Park City, passed down through the years. The mountain man who gave his cabin to a stranger and slept in the barn. The woman who chose a hard life in the wilderness over comfort and ease. Two people who should never have met but whose lives became so intertwined that neither could imagine existing without the other. It was a love forged in snow and sustained through hardship, tested by time and proven true. It was a love that created family, that built home, that changed lives not just for Wade and Katherine, but for every person who came after them. And it all started with a man who heard a cry in the storm and ran toward it instead of away, with a woman who refused to give up even when death seemed certain, with an act of selfless kindness that was repaid 1,000 times over. Their story reminds us that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected places, that love can be found even in the coldest, darkest moments, that a single choice, a single act of compassion can change everything. Wade and Katherine Harlow lived ordinary lives by most measures. They were not rich or famous. They did not change the world in grand, sweeping ways, but they changed each other, and they created a family built on love and respect and kindness. They proved that a good life is measured not in achievements or possessions, but in love given and received, in children raised and grandchildren cherished, in moments shared and memories made. Theirs was a true love story, the kind that transcends time and touches hearts generations later. And it all began with a snowstorm, a cabin, and a mountain man who gave everything he had to save a woman he did not know. In the end, she saved him right back, and together they built something that would last forever.